Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another daily reflection. I'm Dr. Anastasia Horonis, clinical psychologist working in the field of addictions and author of the book, The Dopamine Brain. And I like to jump on here and share some daily reflections with you. Now, if you are someone who is going through the process of addiction recovery, or you are thinking about starting the process of addiction recovery, then welcome. I jump on and I share a daily reflection. Now, daily reflections are really big in addiction recovery, and I'm a big advocate and supporter of using them in really useful ways to reflect on a theme for the day. So there are daily reflection books that you can purchase, but I like to write some of my own. And the daily reflections that I write are based on themes that I'm hearing in the clinic from my patients and clients. There are certainly lots of common themes that come up for people throughout the course of addiction recovery. And so I find these to be really useful reflection points for people because they're often relatable since other people are also talking about these themes. So we'll jump into today's. I'll read it out to you, and then I'm going to share a few of my own thoughts and reflections on the topic based on the work that I do, the research that I do, and the patients that I see in recovery. So the reflection for today is all about shame and on the topic of shame. So it's called Coming Out of the Shadows of Shame. Shame hides us. It tells us that we're unworthy of connection and that we're undeserving of help. It convinces us that if people really knew us, they'd turn away. But shame only grows in the dark. It loses power when we bring light into the story. Recovery is the slow process of stepping out of those shadows and sharing what once felt unspeakable and discovering that we can still be seen and still be accepted. Today, I invite you to notice one thing that you've been keeping hidden out of shame. You don't have to announce it to the world, but just start by admitting it to yourself with honesty and kindness. Healing begins when we stop hiding. So I decided to write this particular daily reflection on the topic of shame because it is something that I have been hearing people talk a lot about lately in the clinic as they come into the therapy room. But it's something that we know to be very common for many people who have struggled through addiction. Shame hides us. When we think about emotions, we think about sort of emotions as having some sort of function, right? So, anxiety motivates us because it elicits that feeling of fear and we can then protect ourselves. Sadness sends a message to us and others that we may have lost something that's of value to us. Guilt tells us that we have gone against our own moral compass and acted in a way that is perhaps not aligned with who we are and what our values are. But shame is a really interesting emotion, and there's so much that we can say on this, and there's so much literature out there about the topic of shame. But the difference between guilt and shame is that guilt says, I have done something bad, and shame says, I am bad. It personalizes it and it internalizes it. And this is not a very helpful way for us to go through the world and live our life. Thinking that we are bad, that we are fundamentally flawed, actually adds a whole other layer to our suffering, and it can make recovery even harder. Shame is also very much in opposition to compassion and self-compassion, which is something that we absolutely encourage people to lean into through the process of addiction recovery. So I invite you to reflect today on the theme of shame. Notice what you might be hiding or keeping to yourself because of that fear of shame, perhaps fear of judgment from others and that fear of self-shame. And think about how things could be different if you put that shame aside for a minute and leaned into more of a self-compassionate approach. Shame keeps us hidden, it keeps us in the shadows, it takes us away from connection, which can be so crucial for us through the process of addiction recovery. So I hope this reflection has been useful for you to reflect on the theme of shame in your own life and in your own recovery journey. I wish you all the best with recovery, and I invite you to share any thoughts, comments, reflections that you have about today's reading in the comment section. All the best and take care.